Okay, thank you very much for uh, asking me to come and present. I appreciate very much the honor to do this. Um, and our topic is indeed this mouthful acronym MCWG for the Multi-Country Working Group on Information Sharing. This group has been in existence a few years, and I would like to start with a little bit of a timeline. It is during the Aichi Connectathon in Sweden, in Montreux, that a couple people, one from Sweden, one from Holland, and met me and said, Charles, our countries are working. We just heard the presentation of France, also working on deploying image information sharing. It looks like there are 4 or 5 other countries that we know are working on this. And all of those programs don't really talk to each other. We have no structure to do that. Would Aichi be willing to host some kind of a collaboration group, working group? And that idea got some legs, was discussed in a couple TCON in the last quarter of 2022. And the idea was found very interesting by the leadership of Aichi Europe and the participating folks that were from those national programs. We were not sure what to do. There was a lot of noise and debate about an emerging program in Europe called eHealth Data Space, EHDS, that would create a harmonized way to share health data both for primary care and secondary usage, spanning all of Europe, covering both cross-border and intra-border and intra-region, and defining EHR interfaces on all of those systems. So people didn't know exactly what it was going to be. It was kind of vaguely announced. And what we decided to do, waiting for a little bit of clarity, was to look at the number of experience. And that's how we got to know Alain, who presented the 10 years of experience in Quebec, who has been a pretty early in performing imaging information sharing. We also covered Veneto, we covered France. And after those presentations, we said, hey, starting September, we have to start working. The European plans are emerging, but not quite clear. Imaging seems to be included, but may take a little bit more time than expected. So several countries said, hey, we don't know when all of this is going to happen. Why don't we continue with our programs and create something to work together? And that's how MCWG moved from sharing experience to say, hey, what if we look at what we have done so far, or plan on doing, or have experience with, or plan on deploying, and in the course of about a quarter, a little bit more than a quarter, in 4 months, we're able to develop 3 sets of recommendations in various areas, and those recommendations are going to be the primary focus of the presentation today. Immediately when this was done and discussed in a few broader circles, some folks said, hey, you forgot some other DICOM services that query imaging information that maybe could be also added to your architecture. And we reviewed this with input from countries that have been working on this and that had experience. And that did an update in one of the 3 recommendations. Our recommendations since the 3rd quarter of 2024 have been stable, and they have been analyzed, and we will see the various element of work that was done to both make them known, available, evaluate adoption, and identify a few area of refinements. And we are still today in that refinement phase. So we are a relatively young group. We've proven that we can work very quickly and amazingly efficiently so far. And if you are interested to know a little bit and have access to that information directly, you have a link below, which is the page for MCW in the IHE Europe website. So having painted the big picture, what is that group? So when we formalized the group in mid 2023, the scope was confirmed to be imaging exchange. And we wanted this to be a complementary effort to the cross-border on imaging exchange that the EU Commission was discussing. We did not want it to compete. We wanted to complement. Our goal was to basically leverage already existing and deployed and emerging IHE profile, DICOM services, the FIRE resources that were becoming clearer at that time, what they were able to do and how it was the various ways of leveraging FIRE. So we took all of this, and essentially what many folks said, hey, there are a variety of ways to skin the cat, and we need to put a little bit of order and evaluate some of the architecture strategy that leverage those standards in different ways and identify the ones that are the most efficient, the most proven, the most robust, the most performing, and so forth. So a lot of dream goals that were typically on the horizon, but relook and assess what has been done in that area that was done in the previous month, so that we look at, are we continuing the same thing? Are we evolving? The benefits was very clear for the participating country. It is getting engaged with each other, learning with each other, and focus on specific issues that the standard and the profiles available were not addressing explicitly or very well or not at all. And those were standing in the way. They were the little missing concrete or pieces of specification that was a large source of discrepancies. So people said, hey, we would like to compare what some of you have done and evaluate what it is and what is your return on experience, and what should we recommend for those who have not yet solved those problems. But in the end, business goal was consistency. The idea was, hey, PACS and RIS and imaging products are fairly consistent with the current standard that are available. But when we start doing a national infrastructure to exchange imaging, the consistency starts falling apart. And essentially, those products connect very well within the enterprise, but they don't connect very well or very clearly or in a robust way outside of the enterprise between each other in order to build large-scale deployment. So if we would do it in a consistent way, we know by experience from the vendors in this part of healthcare that they typically are pretty good at adopting, implementing standards and profile and those kind of things. If we were consistent, we would be offering a more than one country market, because one of the characteristics of the imaging market we can call it a global market, or at least a market that is of interest in a region that contain several countries, and very rare are the imaging products that are sold in a single country in the world. So this consistency was seen as missing and a strategic element. What should we deliver? And the idea here was not to create more standards, but to basically deal on the how to adopt. So we wanted to create a multi-country consensus that is mature, that is as complete as possible, whereas the standards try to cover 80%, the profile are trying to cover 95%. We wanted to cover the remaining 5-10% that are kind of left aside for a variety of reasons by the current standard and profiling exercise. So the other thing was to make those recommendations easy to include into the national interoperability frameworks so that they could be adopted with very little discrepancy. So they needed to be sufficiently explicit. So those were the scope and objectives that have led and that are still the driving elements for MCWG. We chose to move fast. We said, hey, we're not into a green field. We have a fair amount of experience, industry's experience. Some national programs have already done a lot of work for many years, and we have the example definitely on Canada, who took a leadership in the imaging field, about 10 years ago. So we chose to establish the whole group with the governance where we prioritize topic for recommendation. Where are you suffering most? Each participating country says, hey, those are my top 3, top 4 issues. And we assemble those, the whole group vote, and typically says in the coming quarter, or 6 months, depending on the issue, that's where we will be focusing our attention. And some of the members can engage or have more resources or skills in those areas. So we create focus group, and you will see some of those that are taking on a piece of the problem and develop those recommendations that are then reviewed and presented to the plenary. So the goal, and we have always reached that goal, is to have a total consensus among the participating country on those topics that we are working on. Maybe one day when we'll be too many countries, it may be hard to maintain that complete consensus rule, but we want to be striving for this. The number of countries has started with about 5 or 6 countries, has extended to 7, 8, and then we went to 10, and we've been at 10 countries for a year, and we have recently grown to be 11 country, having England with the NHS England, who has an active program in imaging information sharing, joining the MCWG. And for Canada, we were presenting by Quebec, so we had only one province in Quebec, by Quebec in Canada, but are very open to have other provinces to participate. Some countries are very multi-jurisdiction oriented with a fair amount of independence. That's the case of Quebec, but you're not the only one. For example, in Denmark, the regions have each their program, and they are relatively independent from each other. So we also have the capital region that has recently merged with the region that formed this island that is typically, a little over the total population of Denmark, that is today representing Denmark. The other jurisdictions are staying on the side. They are not that interested to progress the topic. So some countries are represented at the jurisdiction level. Some countries have several jurisdictions, and in some cases, it is the entire country with the national program. So that is important. We started to be hosted by IHE Europe, but nowhere our scope is attempting to be European. We want to serve countries all over the world and be flexible there. And we've been very happy to have the Canadian perspective through Quebec to be represented at least in part. So the purpose here has been, as I explained, to produce our first three set of recommendations, and we wanted those recommendations to cover a large number of issues, all of the issues for which good answers were around, had been evaluated, implemented, and proven to work or to not work or to work in part if. And that's what we would like to discuss and share with you initially. We developed those in a PowerPoint slide format because we said, hey, we're not quite sure. Everybody has his own way of developing its own interoperability specification with certain template in certain country. Not easy to adapt to all of those formats. So we will remain and leave our information in an easy way to share, keeping that PowerPoint slide format. And as things evolve, those will be transformed in more textual specification depending on what the countries need, but that was not felt as a major barrier from the start. We want our document to be publicly available, but we are definitely vetting those documents within MCWG first. And once the consensus is established, we are publishing those recommendations. It is clear that the countries that are represented or the jurisdictions or regions are responsible and have active stakeholder group with patients, with care providers, with industry. So we are leaving so far the collaboration and the consultation of stakeholders to the countries. We have, in addition, done a yearly sharing at the IHE Experience Day conference, which is held at the same time as the IHE Europe Connectathon, so that we keep folks very aware that may not be involved in specific country stakeholder groups. And that is something that is about to evolve a little bit, at least in Europe, but we will make it available also globally by, in a sense, taking the core of MCWG and surrounding it with a stakeholder group as we progress and discuss further elements of evolution there. I will come back to this at the end. So in February 2024, we completed a first set of recommendation. It was actually March, but let's say end of February, early March, on three topics. Standards and profile positioning, and that was the big architecture, selecting the major standard components as well as profile, and organizing those to meet a variety of architectures. And we will see what those are in the next few slides. We then developed a set of recommendations on the metadata, because that was definitely an area where there were a basis that was essentially inherited from the IHE XDS-I profile. But we found some limitation there. We felt that there was some elements that were not completely defined, and that was intentional because in those days things were not clear, so IHE could not rule on those. but we also found that the way to perform the linkage between image studies and reports was also a little bit fuzzy in the XDSI. The problem is discussed, a few solutions are mentioned, but nothing definite and something on which we can rely, as well as address the complexity of those relationships between the imaging report and the imaging studies that we discovered are in many cases a many-to-many relationship. And last but not least, in sharing that imaging information in a large-scale environment, we had identified the role of the imaging study manifest, which is a concept that was introduced also in XDSI based on the DICOM costs. And there we also identified a number of gaps. So we worked on those gaps, and you will see that we have done even further work. One of our policy is when those gaps are stable. We've had some countries working on those and implementing and checking that things are working this way. We are going back for significant extensions back to the Aichi radiology group when it is a problem on an Aichi profile that needs an extension, and we'll see some example of this. But we are also, and will go back, and we are planning this in the next few weeks, going back to the DICOM standard itself, so that some of our extensions become adopted by the standard. So in a sense, MCWG is at the deployment implementation level, and we are inheriting from the work that was done by profiling and standards organization, but we are very careful not to violate things, and if we violate things, to provide feedback. Those are important elements that need to be clarified or added to the profile. So when we had done those three sets of recommendations in early 2024, and we had published them, we got some feedback and essentially comments on the way we were handling the viewing of images in web environment, in web browser. And that led to the definition, in addition to a source viewer, of a central viewer function, and also the role of the KIDO, which is a RESTful query interface defined by the WIA profile and DICOM. This had no primary role. WADU, the web access to DICOM objects, was central to our proposed deployment, but KIDO had been found not useful in that large-scale country-level cross-border type deployment, because we were keeping an eye on the cross-border world as well, because that's a topic which is fairly critical on the European side, but also the cross-jurisdiction level, where you are federating architectures and you have to think through what are the architectural modes that are friendly or more or easier to deploy in that environment. In addition to this, so our recommendation, as I said, were stable, have been now stable after this May extension to the first set of recommendations. We have three focus groups that are in active work today. One dealing with the tracking and adoption of the existing recommendation. Who is adopting them? Are there issues? Can we survey and understand? Which has always been a challenging problem to perform in profiling and standards organization, because their customers are very, very distributed and a large number. In MCWG, because we have this national or regional project or entity or agencies or centers that are driving those projects, we had a much easier and more limited number to track and to survey. And you will see that we have done a first step in that direction, and we are expanding this rather rapidly. We want to know what is adopted, what is not adopted, and if it's not adopted, why? Is it simply because it will be adopted in the future, or it is something else is in place, or this is not applicable in those countries? There are perfectly some element of recommendation that may not be needed in certain deployments. So very, very important to look at the tracking and the adoption, and that is what this focus group is doing. We have another working group that is working on the deployment itself. Various techniques have been used in various projects to ease and facilitate adoptions with gateways. But there seem to be also various gateway strategies, and very often the gateways end up being very specific to the project. We are beginning to see some countries that are trying to define generic gateways in a sense that they could be built by different vendors and would work together. So gateway product in that sense applicable to a national or regional deployment, and that would offer a choice to those projects that could deploy with gateways from different vendors. This is something which is emerging, and we expect that with agreed set of recommendation across various projects from different countries, the gateway market will grow for a time, while also native implementation will become more common as they are today, because very often there is an internal gateway in the product, which is not bad. But making things more native are eventually the correct goal when, of course, we will have reached a certain stability. There seems to be another deployment challenge that is addressed by that focus group. That is the clinician understanding that they are using metadata to search and select imaging studies that are relevant to what they are working on with the patient. But clinicians, when you speak to them on the word metadata, they look at you with big eyes and they say, why are you bothering me with something that is not my problem? So what we are trying to do is we are now working on providing a perspective on metadata that is going to be useful for the clinician to continue to ignore what's metadata, but to use it to their advantage. So a little bit of an understanding here seems to be needed. So we have studied this effort, and it proves to be not easy to explain in clinician term why the metadata is what it is and how to use it best to meet their need. And last but not least, we speak of significant images and selecting them, especially for the referring physician that send the patients for an imaging study. Those physicians are not very versed in imaging and like to be pointed at one or two or three, a few images that are significant for them. But the radiologists that are, or whoever the specialist is who is performing a diagnosis on the images, do not always have the necessary tool to do that. Within a PACS, it has been solved, but in a multi-deployment and a large-scale deployment, we found that there were actually gaps to make this work efficiently for the physicians in the term of deployment. And I will touch a little bit on those yellow group. You understand that they are working today. So yes, the work is progressing, but not yet complete. So we cannot share the conclusion that have not been reached. So let's dive into the heart of the matter: standards and profile positioning. The use case here is a very classic use case. We found that the use cases were very, very consistent across the various projects, and the European group on EHDS had a group for 9 months that has kind of documented the use case that has been reviewed and adopted by several countries in Europe. We have looked at it and we said, hey, whether we are in Europe or not, the use case is the same. So we are relying on this document. We felt it was not necessary to re-document a use case that already had been documented in a multiplicity of ways. One of the salient point that has been brewing, but not always clearly expressed, is that we have in the sharing of images two ways to access the images that are needed, not for technical reason, but for deployment and environment in which the images are being used. The first one, and it's actually the second bullet, is people want to access to DICOM images that are stored somewhere else of interest and bring them in their system so that they can be viewed and handled alongside local DICOM images for the same patient, so that it can be handled in a DICOM image viewer, just as if all of those DICOM images were local. We call that the requester side viewer and processor of imaging, and it needs absolutely the native DICOM images and their richness to perform this function. But we also found that there are the very basic professionals that are accessing images and the patient, who basically start classically by the report, look at the imaging report, and would like to simply click on an imaging report and see an image viewer open in their browser, and view those images that are referenced in the report for the examination that have been used as input to that report. So I don't care how it happens, but in the end, I want to stay in my browser and be able to browse on the images if I need to, after having retrieved the report. So it's kind of a report-driven review in an environment where the word DICOM sounds very impolite, or at least not easily understood and handled by the necessary software and the associated sophistication. And we found that distinguishing those two was important. It was done on the imaging guideline. It has been done in a number of other countries, but here it was done in a much clearer way. So that's an element of use case that we believe needed to be highlighted. In terms of choice of profile and standards, there was a big question. People said, hey, everybody is speaking about HL7 fire. Does HL7 fire plays a role in imaging information sharing? Yes, no, maybe, in part, where? So that role needed to be addressed, and addressed very well, because there are definitely functions for which HL7 fire is very well suited, and using it is a critical plus. We also wanted to select in the world of existing profile, either based on fire, like the MHD profile from IHE, not directly based on fire. Also, fire could be used, example, for the imaging report in XDSI or XCI. And we wanted definitely to use the DICOM web services, especially the WADU-RS. That was a strong request by half of our members and identified as one critical element. We want to use WADU-RS to retrieve images that's that's what was identified as a critical element. So how do you combine and play with all of this? We had to define three, I would say, classes or type of architectures or deployment architectures. The idea there is to say a type A architecture is a country where there is a central document registry uh, that has distributed PACS and VNA. So typically, the imaging studies are in the PACS or in VNA that are shared among certain PACS or specific to a certain PACS and that are distributed. But there is a central document registry where you find the reports and you find typically the manifest, and you have enough knowledge to go and get the imaging study in those remote PACS and VNA. We had the B architecture, where there are multiple document registries. Those are typically the countries that have multiple jurisdiction. And within those jurisdictions, there is again a distribution of a PACS and a VNA. And we have the C type, where the country or a region is actually completely centralized. And we have, this case is quite common. There is in a region or in a country, central everything. The knowledge about the imaging study, call it document registry. There is a central VNA that stores all of the images of the country or the region. And there was the third type of architecture. The C architecture is very typical in small country, but is also used in some larger countries or region. So having classified our deployment architectures in those A, B, C mode, we said now, and having the use case, having the deployment architecture, we can now have a decent discussion as to which standard profile is best applicable. So the first element that was not the initial decision, but we can describe it this way, is using a manifest, and we choose to stick with the DICOM cost because it was widely used, widely deployed. We could build a manifest in Fire, but it was felt that the software that is relying on the information in the DICOM cost is very often an imaging software, because the thing that it does with that information is get the images and display them. So we decided to stick to the DICOM cost world, and the transaction to move that cost where in the three architecture, they could be MHD with a Fire-based document reference resource, or plus DICOM WADU, RESTful. And for the architecture A and C, it could be XDSI. This is a pretty large install base. It's SOAP-based, maybe not preferred today. REST is more fashionable today than SOAP was a few years back, but there are some countries that have deployed, and there are even some countries that have new projects that are actually deploying XDSI. Why? Because it's off the shelf, it works, it's proven, and they prefer robustness to restfulness. And to that, you add WADU RS. And we had also, but only for the B architecture, which is the federation, XCAI, which is SOAP-based, and REST. You notice that we did not include MHD in the B architecture, although there are some people that are working on this. It has some issues today that do not I'm reading the question about the slide. Yes, the slide would be shared. The previous version of this slide deck is on the MCWG website, and this slide deck will be posted probably within a week at most, but I can share it with you anytime you want. So you see a choice of profile, both Fire and SOAP. a prominent place of DICOM WADU-RS and of the DICOM costs. We will rediscuss the costs in a few slides because it has some interesting things. The second area is the linkage between imaging studies. Could I ask Alain, do we have an hour or an hour and a half?
We have an hour, Charles.
An hour, okay. So I will speed up a little bit.
Charles, you have 13 minutes to the end with
yeah, I know.
That's no Q&A, okay?
Okay, that's a little bit embarrassing. So we'll have to go fast because I want to address some questions. So the linkage was also well studied, and essentially we decided to link via the metadata imaging report and imaging study, leveraging the order number, leveraging the accession number, and leveraging the study UID. The metadata, we did a lot of work on the metadata, and that is somewhat summarized on this slide. We recognize that you need an initial query to perform filtering, and you see here the 6 primary attributes that are used to perform the filtering, and the initial filtering is a query level 1. You see that on the right side. And the retrieve after selection is performed. The query level 2 is when you already have some information and you're making some pointy requests, either because you got the report and you want to get at the corresponding studies, for example. So the metadata elements are defined. Some of them are pretty obvious, although we did some work on ensuring that we have the value set well established for those. The linkage, it's the middle of the slide. Here the linkage is quite simple. Everything is an MN relationship. We found that in a clinical order, you may get, as a result, multiple image report, multiple image study. An image study may relate to multiple reports may relate to the same imaging study. So all of the relationship, we found use cases to address them. Those are completely documented in the slides. We had to work on a number of value set that you see here. The imaging procedures and the laterality was an issue that needed some work, and we addressed it. As well as we had to go to some non-imaging specific metadata that was standing in the way, because in the deployment of XDS or MHD, those are sometimes addressed in different ways. And finally, we needed to address the workflow. When do you publish an imaging data? And we found that there were 2 strategies here that was used in certain countries, either one or the other. So the publication trigger was important. So you see that we are leaving flexibility where flexibility makes sense. And that's a key element. The imaging study manifest, the editorial rule applied to anatomical region, display name, etc. You will see that because those terminologies are very stable, and we relied on SNOMED and the stability of SNOMED, editorial rules played a minor role. So we have not considered this as worthy of our interest so far, but we may be wrong. So bringing this as a topic for future work may be relevant. The imaging study manifest, we debated the use of the DICOM costs versus using the imaging study resource from FHIR. We found that both could be used. A DICOM, a FHIR document bundle would work perfectly well. as a manifest. And we looked at both and said, hey, both need a few extensions. So neither one is perfect. We found that the imaging costs was widely deployed today, where building a manifest with fire imaging study resources was not really deployed. It could be done, but it was not deployed. And so, and the alignment with the consuming software for the manifest, which is typically imaging software, made the day, and we decided to stick to the DICOM cost. So a number of other things are listed here with the study manifest, but I don't have time to address them. What is the ongoing work? We are dealing with the tracking and adoption. We have a survey that we will see very quickly. We also have a process that we stole from IHE and DICOM on change proposals so that if there are errors, you can easily submit a correction request, and we can track those with a clean process. Here you see the adoption dashboard. Actually, if you take the recommendation, that the 3 set of recommendation, each table is a set of recommendation, and you get the 3 sets. Here you have the compilation of 4 countries, the first 4 countries that responded to the survey. And you see that the world is not entirely green. There is a fair amount of partially aligned, of future consideration. That's kind of interesting, things that people have not done, but they will do eventually. Things that they have not considered, that they don't need, and some element of red where the countries are not aligned. So when you join MCWG and you have an imaging deployment, it does not mean that your deployment has to be compatible with the agreement in MCWG because you did it way before. So MCWG here is not to criticize, but simply recognize that people have done other things. So that's what you see in the dashboard, and we want to make this clear, explicit, so that the people that are joining and doing something new understand that there are some non-alignment and there are areas where there is more alignment, so they will take into account that information. We have those deployment group. We are performing a generic market assessment. We are discussing the gateway tools and how to rationalize the gateways so that it can be a product. So we are not building product, but we are defining a gateway that could be a product concept, and we are relying on a fair amount of work that was done and which is actually being built for deployment early 2025 in France. We define a standard gateway, and what that is seeing a significant number of vendors adopting that standard gateway definition, and that gateway can interface to any packs and any risks on the market at the 99% chance. So very important to understand those tools. Finally, we worked on significant images. The IHE kin profile is very promising. But when you work in a distributed environment in a remote way, if your goal is to say, give me only the significant images flagged by kin, you discover that the number of transactions you need to do that is not very friendly. So it's a little bit on the heavy side. So we found that with a few minor enhancements, the cost manifest can streamline that access to significant images and make it much more easy for the clinician. So we are today, that's where we are. It's important that we continue to build. You see that there are a number of future topics that we know that we have not addressed yet, that we will put on our plate once our currently yellow focus group are completed. So probably sometime in December or January, we will review all of those topics, take a vote. Every country has one vote, and the topic that have the most vote, the top 2 or 3, are being accepted. Typically, the number is 2, and they become the focus for the coming a few months. So that's how MCWG is attacking and getting at helping and solving this deployment effort and make it as consistent as possible. We have made an agreement with a European project to help us create and manage a stakeholder group around the core MCWG with the national or regional program. And we are also collaborating with Europe, like we could collaborate with different countries, so that the specification of the European data space is consistent with the MCWG recommendation and is a factor that speed up adoption in Europe. So we don't have Europe as a country. We have the European countries that are represented, but we are also facilitating that support where the European Commission wants to take a little bit of a coordinating role. So we are saying, hey, you want to coordinate? We do too. Let's work together. But we do that through the countries. Thank you very much. Open for questions. It's your turn.
Thank you very,
Sorry.
thank you very much,
There was a lot of
Charles.
material, and I skipped a lot of issues. Yes.
What will be distributing the presentation? So I think we can put David. We can put that on the Infoway site. Is there?
Yes.
What's the vehicle? Yes.
Yeah,
Okay. So
once either Charles shares with us or sends us a link, we'll post that on the InfoCentral forum. And
Okay.
just to let everyone know, if you sign up for the community, you have access to our archives. So all our presentations that have been given are kept in the files, as well as previous work. Maybe I can give you a couple of questions, Charles, before you have to leave. One is from Luis. Is there a plan to build a European master patient index?
The answer to that is no, there will never be a European master index because it is the job of the countries to manage their own index. So there is ways to federate and to typically query from one country the index of another country. So that's the first step when you do cross-border. This is working today for e-prescription, e-dispensation, and patient summary.
So maybe, Luis, I'm going to get into this a little bit with Charles. And he's referenced a lot of good work that we're seeing in Europe that we dream of here. One is, and my previous question is around patient privacy and security. You know, that was a big concern 15 years ago. And in a way, that's been a barrier for us to move forward in a lot of jurisdictions and a reason for not sharing. And I think we need to blow past that. I think by ensuring privacy and information, we can use trusted frameworks. Yeah. And that's what's the basis
and I can tell you
IP.
that we have chosen not to tackle this problem at this time. However, we are building everything so that it's easy to address. And they are, however, elements, and we will probably, I would bet, in the next quarter or in 2025, in the first half of 2025, we're going to lay out the groundwork, because we are seeing now a more common understanding, a better structuring, so that people typically are slowly converging. So we think it is time where we could put a doctrine, at least in MCWG, on doing this. There is, however, an element of doctrine which is emerging. That is a great simplification. All of the access right you put on the manifest are the access rights of the imaging study. Okay, so I'm leaving that to you. The manifest is a document. If you know how to manage access rights and consent on any other document that you share in your environment. You put those rights on the manifest, and those rights apply to the imaging study, the manifest reference. Now, that doesn't solve everything, but I can tell you that it is a major simplification element and also allows you to reuse a lot of stuff that you've done to share whatever report or summaries or so forth.
Okay, Alain, I think
Oh.
we've run out of time, and
Yeah, I think I would just like a quick word, David, to add. So far, like 2 jurisdictions in Canada have filled the questionnaire that Charles has referenced. So Quebec and Alberta. So please, any other jurisdiction, please reach out. If you use XDS, the MCWG would very much like to hear from you through that questionnaire and to kind of inject so there are more Canadian perspective in the survey beyond Alberta and Quebec.
Yeah, and we are willing to work with you and clarify things if you think the questions are not clear. But so far we've had 4 countries responding. The first 2 was a little bit difficult. The third one was easy, and the fourth one was even easier. So we believe that is worth your time because you can do an assessment and you don't need to worry about it. And we'll be happy to include it in our collated set of information. Thank you in advance.
So we'll answer.
And you can join MCWG directly. Talk to Alain. He will tell you how to apply. It's easy, friendly, and we can easily involve you in any future work as you wish.
And we'll address offline the 2 other questions that weren't addressed. So there's 2 of them. And I think on this, thank you very much, Charles. I think we very much appreciate your presence, and thank you everyone for attending, and hopefully see you at the next event in January on the migration.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, and wish you a good rest of your day.
thank you, Charles.
Same to
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.